What's in the baskets today? It's like roses. Probably the petals will go into the soaps. I live with a soap maker. And then these are elderberry flowers, calendula petals, and then more roses. Okay, there was that hail I was talking about not hitting the tree. It's not huge, but those are our blooms in the hail there. Oh, it's getting bigger. Look at the ground around you, there's some big ones there. Look at the ground around you, there's some big ones. And a lot of bloom. Well, there's been a lot of bees out, so even though we can see thousands of petals being knocked to the ground. Ah, yeah, look at the deck. This is where I grew up. This is the pond that my dad and his 3 brothers built for my grandma. The garden is when we came down here from Oregon. Moved onto this property with my grandparents. Lived with my mom and dad and my grandparents here. Now my nieces live here and my parents still, and I'm very lucky for that. It's only 1.5 acres. Before all the vineyards, when everything was still orchards. We're at the beginning of the orchards, in fact. This is the landscape that's made out of my grandparents' plantings and then our tending since. That's where I learned to be a gardener. My grandmother was like a world-class botanist. That's why we're under Chinese maples, stacked under dawn redwoods, and surrounded by every type of plant that you could imagine. Just gone wild into a deep hardscape. And then the stones that I came back in later and laid myself, now gone to looking pretty old. The waterfalls my dad and his brothers built for my grandma. Anyways, this is where my dirt journal started. This is where my dirt journal began. And come back here, be able to come back here, to have just a tiny piece of land. Very much a blessing. It's my grandfather's shop. I learned to do all of my original tinkering and stuff in there. It's actually just a basic lean-to shed thing built over the 2 original bunkhouses. Yeah. The wild harvest has started. Here is one of the volunteer crops. Oh, gray cat. That's the cat that I rescued. But these volunteer in my yard because I live on a creek. You might recognize them. They're miner's lettuce. And we're going to have a big old feast of them tonight for sure. They melt away as soon as it gets hot, but they are one of the things that you can forage for in the wild. They're totally edible. And these little seed pods, they're little flowers, will actually rain out lettuce size, little black shiny seeds, but by the thousands. So if you let them go to seed, they literally melt away, and you can like finger rake them out of your landscape. They hold the space, is one of the things that they do, and keep other grasses and other weeds from sprouting until literally the water runs out, and then they dry out. But yeah, miner's lettuce, the California delicacy. Come on. Come on. So these are just little barrels, like the other part of my garden that I've set up where I can grow things in. And out of the soil that I put there, sprouted this miner's lettuce. Now it comes up in other spots in my yard in small form. These got gigantea because they're in such good soil. So I'm taking the advantage of that, and I'm going to mix it in with some regular greens. These are actually a chickweed. These are an edible plant too, so it's pretty cool that all the edibles are mixing together. But just for flavor's sake, and to not scare them too much, I'm going to just stick with the miner's lettuce. And then that's what one of my survival teachers, my favorite survival teacher, Al Lilleberg, his main theory on having us try different foods all the time was to desensitize us to it, so that in real survival situations or foraging situations it would seem way more normal. Having already passed the threshold once, you'd be more accepting of having to eat things later on. Now, of course, we're eating a lot of bugs and weird stuff, but if I ever had to, I could again. And you can see we're getting quite the load. It's just 3 people eating tonight, so. And for miner's lettuce, that is some big stuff. Now you mix that with a little sorrel and a little chickweed. I mean, you could have your own little salad just in early spring. We could take the top of these kale. Any of the brassicas actually end up kind of being a real flavorful little treat if you pick the blooms. You throw those in and add a little flavor to it, and they end up being kind of like a little raw broccolini. I let all my kale and stuff go every year so that I can get the seed off of it, because when you let a plant naturalize to your ground, it will hybridize. It will become stronger and more resistant to all the bad stuff and more used to the conditions of your land. And so it'll be custom seeds just for your property. And you can see everything else is in full growth now. All the trees with their leaves on it. Give you a better look around in the daylight. But here's one of the kales, and instead of ripping it out because I don't need the room yet, I've left it, and you can see it's loading up with seed pods. And that's how much seed we can get. So literally we'll fill a jar with kale seeds from our land. There's actually a lot of edibles here. We could throw some calendula and violets. We could get crazy with it. We're just going to do miner's lettuce. And yeah, mix that in with some vinaigrette, regular salad lettuce. And should be a good feast. For sure. We just came out of frost and very little light, so this is some of the first things you can grow, are the wild things. Dinner. See if I can get these captured on film. This is one of the little plum trees. This is the reason why I'd never use a pesticide of any sort. I do get aphid outbreaks, but what I also get is swarms of these little soldier beetles. You shake a branch, I'll show you how many there are. Can I just borrow you for 1 second here? On camera, dude. And they're literally crawling all over every part of this and every other part of the garden, and these are predatory insects, so they eat herbivore insects. These don't eat plants at all. They eat the ones eating your plants. See, so here we had aphids. So I had an outbreak. So probably one beetle landed and found out that they were here, or they check the tree every year. I don't know how it works, but they show up and they start swarming it, and they're voracious. And so they don't eat plant matter at all. They only eat the aphids and stuff. And they literally go over and over and over it. That, and then the woodpecker has come along and chewed on the tree, but that was to get out the little beetle grubs that would have bored around and killed the tree. So he has to dig a hole like a surgeon to get the worm out. And now the tree is knuckling over. You can see the little fresh areas, and it'll actually close up that wound. And since the vital juices of the tree travel up and down, it doesn't matter if it has a wound unless it goes all the way around and cuts off the life flow altogether. So it can take these little injuries and then recover. And that's part of the thing that the beetles do, is they come through here like this and do that type of damage, which is really hard to recover from. So the woodpeckers are here trying to keep up with that, and the beetles are here trying to keep up with the aphids. Swarming. It would have helped if you didn't have time. Maybe it'll pick up. There. That's how I got it the first time. I'm sure you can't make it out, but it's not just one tree over there. As the sun goes down, the sky is filled with the soldier beetles. There's tens of thousands of them swarming on my property, crawling over every branch on every tree and every plant, just mopping it up for me. These are larger ornamental calendulas that are coming in now. You can see their seeds are basically the same thing, and the flower just on a larger level. But those are what Danielle will use in her soap products and stuff like that mostly. And then these are the wild ones with their smaller blooms that are going out now. These will be around for the rest of the season, whereas the others start to look kind of ugly at a point as they brown out. And their value for feeding the bees is almost finished now, so. And because I've been planting for so many years in the same areas, you have things like these hollyhocks. See that as I pull this up, there's things they've already sprouted underneath it that are ready to do the next wave. And that's how both your desirables and non-desirables will both be waiting for that light signal. So you see we have hollyhock, hollyhock, hollyhock. This is an ice plant that I use. You can rip this stuff up like that and literally throw it in a spot like that, and it just roots in. It only takes one little piece to spread it around, and it's great stuff. You can see that in a year it'll cover a whole area like that. It's invasive in a sense because it grows so profuse, but you can just rip the stuff up and spread it to other areas and use it like a roll-up ground cloth. I mean, the stuff just pull up if you want to. It's like a sod, and it wages a war to when it's done. The soil is there are no other plants that are growing there, and it's one just because it masses them out. Oh, a little wild phobia. It's a little kind of obnoxious, invasive little thing. It's like your ornamental phobias, but smaller. Has that same itchy sap. So this whole landscape is just a landscape that had only native plants, and half of those were non-desirable weed species when I started. So that's how I learned a lot about not continuously planting a bunch of new annuals every year and trying to establish a library of seeds that would work for me, even when I was busy working myself. One of the biggest ways that you lose moisture out of your land and out of your soil is through evaporation through the air. One of the main ways that you can stop that evaporation from happening and conserve water and keep your plants moist for longer and make them 100 times more healthier because of it is to use any sort of covering besides just the raw dirt. Think of the raw dirt as flesh without skin on it. So it doesn't matter if you put down plastic peanuts, gravel, plastic sheeting, bark, wood chips, I've seen all sorts of things, cocoa husks, straw, all sorts of things, anything besides just the raw soil. It will hold 100 times more water in it for way longer. What I like to do on my property is at this time of year, I have a bunch of annuals going out, my little wildflowers that have gotten profuse, grown, and then now are dying off. I will pick them and spread them around my other plants like straw. But one of the benefits of doing that is that straw can carry grass seeds and stuff back into your landscape because of its nature. No matter how well they harvest it, there's inevitably grass seed left in the straw bales. And one of the things I don't like about that is that it's not only spreading grasses that you don't want, basically weeds, back into your own landscape if you're not careful, but when you spread it in outdoor projects, and then you are introducing non-native grasses into landscapes where they weren't already, possibly. And non-native grasses are some of the things that here in California wiped out most of our wildflowers. That was the single thing beyond all the cows, human activity. The grasses that were brought along ended up being the main devastator, like a rabbit can or a pig can. Here it was the grass. So as I see them continuously spreading out the straw bales, I think, eek, that's a good technique. I know why you're doing it. Good theory, but the practice is a little flawed. So I figure using things like your dried out calendula and wildflower bodies as a cover, as a top dressing like that, instead of the straw, the worst case scenario is that you get more flowers sprouting up. So if you can, I understand sometimes grabbing some straw is the only thing you can do. I've used it in videos here in the Dirt Journal. So anyhow, I'm going to place this stuff around these artichokes that I have where I had to remove some weeds. And the weeds, probably being grasses, will just come back because there's already a seed store in the soil. So this will block out the light and they won't get the signal to resprout, and it'll hold on the moisture, and inevitably it'll plant some flower seeds, which then can begin the proactive battling attritional battles that plants hold against each other. So for every good plant that you plant, it is holding a place in the landscape that it's harder for non-desirable plants to grow. These are all irises I brought from my grandma's yard, divided up. Got the creek all cleaned up on my side, and then look. That's an olive and a Danielle. This is this creek. It's raging during the winters. It goes from that road all the way across to this little easement road. My property basically ends right where you see that swing set. Actually, my property ends right here where the ramp goes down. Then that's an easement, and then that's creek, which is all public. So when you hear me talking about public rights and stuff, I'm actually one of the people that lives on a public creek. And there's my kid's swing set, and that belongs to the public. So I kind of practice what I preach there. I don't own that creek. Nobody does. It's California. Isn't that awesome? It's beautiful, huh? And then this is the patch of native shrub that was left, and it's like a scrub oak. There's Blue Jay. Hey, Blue Jay. And this was my compromise here. So this whole half of the property had been scraped down to put lines down to the sewer main and blah blah blah, all that type of thing. And it was just scrub brush, the same stuff, but when it's reduced down to stumpage. A lot like that will be over there in a few more months. And you can see this stuff wants to develop. These are all low shoots I have to continuously take off. It wants to just be a solid brush in here. But it was also extremely steep, like at that type of pitch, like up to here. So between stacking rocks, stacking crazy piles of like that's all just logs and twigs and debris and stuff. And then carving into it, I literally chiseled into it down here with pickaxes and stuff. There's Blue Jay. It's like 10 family or generations of them that have lived here with us now. Grew up with our cats and our kids. But anyhow, so I long ago when I first got here came through and took all the little lower twigs off this, and that's what it turns into. And it's been walked through and gotten its check off from the fire inspectors every year annually and all that, which we have to go through here. But yeah, that's the end of my property. It's literally here. Now we just use the easement because it's easement. Got the fence there. When there's less people in the neighborhood, my dogs could just run back and forth, but things got tight. And then the end of the property is like right there, and right past the little playhouse. So all of my little gardens, only from right here to the street beyond my house, is only a half acre. So all these things I show you are on 0.4 of an acre, and were put here within the last 10 years. Things like this little ceanothus resprouted, and then I've trained it into a little lollipop. So, but because these were overhead high, this little corner here, 20 little oak bushes were the only things overhead high. I left them and made it to a shady spot because it can get to be 100 degrees. The rest of this is just stacked wall after stacked wall. And you can see it's all greening up. Okay. Now I'm just going to apply this straw. You can see this is more of the calendula in here, and when we pull back after I get that out, it'll just all be these peas and poppies. It's the only thing that's still dead in the landscape. So, and then next time I'll give you a walkthrough, because flowers, because this little red bud, this is one of the natives, flowers are turning to seed and fruit. That's all, it's little seed pods on there. Yeah, in 3 years, I probably put 1, 2, like 5 irises there, and that's what they turn into. And then anywhere I can, like these grasses are native grasses. Those aren't ornamental, even though people use them. And the little sage that's over there, and that ceanothus in that bay, I work them back in. I leave them. And this is all native stone pulled out of here to make a ledge to plant things and then stack up behind it. And the peaches and just our little modular. This is a little random olive, but we're working with it here. It's growing out of the staircase. These will have to be replaced in another year or two, hopefully cement. And yeah. So, clean that out. That's all fresh, growing. The raw dirt bothers me a little bit. It will leak a lot of water, but hopefully those plants will swell out really quick and it'll be okay. So we'll gather some more of this plant matter and go toss it over on the artichokes where it's also a little barren. These are clary sage. So it's gone from its low, tight cabbage form up to this, and then it puts out its huge conical blooms, and they throw so many seeds around your yard that you have to pull them out or they start eating your walkways. The trouble with tribbles. All of these things, 90% of these things are landscape, either new from my grandparents' property where I grew up, or from landscaping, which I did for a long time. I still do. I don't know why I'm saying did. And so a lot of the times things get out of control at properties and you rip out garbage cans full of them. And I would bring chunks home and knowing that they would take off and go crazy too. So that's another trick is picking plants that you know are going to be crazy wild things and starting with them because you can always peel them back to stick other things in. There they are. They made it all the way around when I was talking. It's going to be a long video. So yeah, that's why we have, this is oregano. It roots to the ground just like a mint, so if you put a plug in, this patch started over there somewhere and has spread and spread and spread and spread along with the ice plant. They've mixed together along with violets, and they all just seem to co-mingle. And then we have bachelor buttons that for some reason found one little sprig of light, and they're gonna come out of here, and then those grow over to basically where this rose has hugged all of the sunshine and it's a little bare under it. And yeah, run with what you got. These were just stumps turned on edge. I'll have to replace with rock as they rot away, but it afforded us 2 more terraces. Oh, looks like Gopher nibbled that little batch down. So yeah. And you can see, look, that's all oregano. It's growing through the ground like mint will do. It's all the way there. It's actually coming out of the bottom of my rock wall there. So that oregano will grow from there to the creek if you let it, like a crazy person actually. If we cast this clary sage here, you see oregano coming out on this terrace here. And this looks a little crazy, but until I plant anything here, I don't want to expose too much dirt or weeds could grow. You can see it's just peas and more peas and bachelor buttons and oregano, and I really don't have to do a whole lot of weeding when all of that is going on. But I am going to pull these dead calendula out of here everywhere and then use them for top dressing. Okay. This is the next section, so everything's cleared out of here, and I had to straighten up these peas so that I could still have my little pathway run down below. They get crazy, so you gotta kind of lay them side by side, but they'll stand back up and then they'll all go into their crazy bloom in the next few days. There'll be a wall of pink there. We have our little area here, and until I plant anything else in, all that I might do is remove the watercress so I don't have to deal with its seeds next year. I'll leave the little poppies, and that'll be that. But then I turn around here and I'm like, oh, so much good, but it looks a little rough. Just need to pull all this dead out of here. So you can see it gets down to just the wall. The succulents all recovering from a frosty winter. And this is soil that's slipped down, but that's okay. Filling in the cracks. These are all the larger calendula that were trapped underneath. And will those little calendula be back? Yeah. Look at the ledges here. Do you see how many little seeds there are? Each one of those little curls that you see is calendula seed. Look at that library. You see that? That's just one ledge. The entire soil. Don't worry about them. They'll be back next year. Same location. Same show. Now we're ready for this year's whatever's gonna happen here. And yeah, this is where a lot of my rocks go. Okay, well, that's pretty cleaned up, and then we'll take this and apply it where it goes. And you can't beat that. I think they did that just for you guys. And then that's all public open space land over there. And then ranches, and because I lived out here long enough, I ran into the ranchers over time and got permission on that one, Mr. V. Thank you, Mr. V. And yeah, so basically, as far as I could walk in a day, that's where you see me a lot of the time. For those of you that are watching this, that also watch some of the treasure hunting. Look at that sunset. That's just wild. Hi, little dragon. It's just a camera. It's the camera. It always weirds you out, huh? Yeah. I saw you were hunting gophers. Okay, let's go put this over there. Oh, I guess we'll take 2 loads. You leading the way, Andy? This is a poor man's landscape. I built this with time and stuff. Not so much materials or planning. Sorry, did I almost set that on you? We're gathering up some of this. We'll throw it under. Got almost all the weeds killed out in the landscape. Got so hogged up with good stuff that you just gotta pick through it. So this is where my stick pile is, and I've applied a bunch of the weeds there to kind of cover up the ugly sticks underneath, and then some dirt, and then planting that, and you have a whole other ledge where it used to go right downhill from there. Right? And this is the same thing. Irises that I put in a couple of spots have just gone nuts. I'll show you the rest of all that in another video. We have to look at all of these fruit trees all loaded up for the year and stuff. If you're interested and you come back. Okay. So over here I had to do a bunch of weeding. The gophers came by, nipped off a big old chunk of my artichoke, but it's already resprouting from its root wad. It's okay. I pulled a bunch of the grasses and stuff. This is doing okay, those are coming back. But where I have all this bare dirt to keep weeds from growing, because it's mostly always been weeds. And that's all the seeds that will be here, not they have sunlight on them. The second they get water, they'll explode back and all of your work will just be a circle. So we're gonna cover them up with something so they get no light. And we'll be delivering positive seeds in the most lazy way you can, and instead of inducing more non-native grasses by using a straw, we can just do that, and it'll actually dry out and look pretty darn uniform soon after. But yeah, some of these poppies I pulled because they were in the way already have their pods on them, and so then there is less negatives next year and more positives. And for now, the light will be ours. There, that looks good. Just kidding. We're gonna make it look all aesthetic.